Hello, and welcome to I Hate Talking, a podcast about talking, including etymology, frustrating topics, current events, and other random subjects. I'm Adam.
And I'm Steph. We are married, and we invite you into these discussions with us as we talk about the good and the bad of talking.
We hope you enjoy today's episode. Welcome to episode 60 of I Hate Talking.
Whoa! Hi, everyone.
So 60 is exciting, but 50 is not?
I threw you off. I guess I'm more excited for... Is that weird that I'm more excited for 60 than 50?
Yeah, I think so. Because 50 is half of 100. 60 doesn't really have any particular multiplier.
I don't know. 60 sounds like you're over halfway. Like, I don't know. I think 60
Halfway
is a
to
bigger
what?
deal.
Halfway to what? 120?
I don't know. What number is more exciting for you?
50.
Y'all, put in the caption, what's more exciting, 50 or 60?
Okay. We'll find out.
We'll find out.
So today's word or phrase comes from a particular word that we used in our previous episode, rubric. Rubric.
I used that word.
You
I
did.
remember.
So would you care to define it then, since you were the
Sure.
one that used it?
Sure. But were you impressed I used that word?
I was.
Sometimes I can tell when you're impressed at a word I use. I used another word in conversation recently, and you were like, what? I was like, that's the right word, right? And you're like, yeah, but it's a big word. Okay, so rubric. I would think of it as in the concept of school or just in structure. Like, these are the things that we're going to hit, like the ideas or goals, concepts, structure, that this happens, then this, then this. And you kind of have to check them off to be complete.
Yep. So according to our favorite Oxford Language Dictionary, it can actually mean a number of different things. So what you were referring to is definition number 2. So it basically means a statement of purpose or function. So with regards to how something is done, or almost like a checklist that certain things have to be done in order to serve their purpose or function, is one of the main definitions of the word rubric. It can also specifically mean a liturgical book, as how a church function should be conducted. So the rubric on conducting a service or program would be another definition
Liturgy?
of rubric. Essentially, liturgy.
Okay.
Now, it's not the liturgy itself. So if you are doing a responsive reading or reciting something or doing the Pledge of Allegiance or whatever the case may be, it is not the liturgy itself. It is basically the instruction that that particular recitation or reading should be done. So again, sort of the same concept as your checklist.
Okay.
So that's how rubric would be used in terms of liturgy. It's not the recitation itself, but basically that they need to do that recitation during that program or service. And then it can also mean just generally a category. So the example given here is, quote, such ideas fall naturally under the rubric of postmodernism, end quote.
Okay, but even as a category, it's still saying like these are the checklists, right? Or these are the concepts you have to reach for postmodernism.
Correct. Yes. Okay. So the etymology of this one is interesting. It actually comes from Latin, and it comes from the Latin word rubeus, which means red, and then was used in the Old French as rubric and the Middle English as rubric, and then came to be used in the modern language as rubric within the English. And this word is perhaps different than any of our previous words, where it had some of the existing definition as it flowed through the different languages and the etymology of the word. But this particular word, rubric, is a modern word that just draws on the fact that that Latin word, rubeus, literally means red.
What are your feelings about the word rubeus?
Well, it makes sense that it would be red since it calls to mind rubies.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps that's where rubies get their etymology as well. And that would be something that perhaps the Latin speakers of the day would refer to rubies as rubeus in terms of their description of color.
How do you feel about the word?
I don't have any particular feelings about the word, I
You
don't
don't
think.
like it? Does it sound like anything else you know?
No, I don't think so.
You've always, I'm harking back, like instantly heard when you listed those Latin words. For every pregnancy we ever had, you always liked the name Ruben. It was like the name you'd always throw out there. And we never used it. List the root words again. What are they?
Rubeus in Latin, rubriche in French, rubriche in Middle English, and rubric in modern English.
They don't sound like Ruben to you?
Perhaps a little bit, but no, I was thinking more of a word, not a name.
Okay. I didn't know if you'd be like drawn to those and be like, yes, I like that word. Because you always wanted it. And I mean, it's a great word. If your name is Ruben, it's an amazing name and we're happy for you. I felt like never fit.
Well, maybe for the next kid then.
Oh. Next kid?
No, it was a joke.
This is not an announcement. No next kid.
Correct.
But
So
if you're open to it, I would be okay.
I am not open to it. I am committed to that decision. So the early Latin writers would not have used rubeus to mean that concept of rubric that we were discussing in terms of liturgy or checklist or categories. They would have only used rubeus in terms of the exact description of an object as having that red color. It does have some relationship to how they would describe earth in terms of the red clay. So that also would be how they would have used that particular word, but they would not have used it as rubric. The way that rubric comes about in the English is just because it means literally red, and that color of text would have been used in a rubric to indicate that type of checklist or categories that had to be met in order to do something in a liturgical fashion, while the liturgy itself would be in normal black text.
Interesting, because true, right? When you read something, they often will put something in red, and that's like the emergency or urgent or necessity kind of information. So that's what you're saying?
Precisely. So rubric in terms of education or business would be those critical things that have to be done. And then the regular text would have been sort of the extended definition or even the specifics on sort of that category of things that must be done. And you might even have some things where rubrics are written in superscription, so aside the text or above the text in terms of a title or critical information, and then the rest of the information follows that is not technically part of the rubric. So that is how rubric came to be used in the modern English versus how Latin writers of the day would have used that just to describe the color.
Super interesting. So I feel like that's very different than your typical word. It's kind of using a concept more than a word itself, right?
Precisely. I don't think in any of our previous 59 episodes that we ever had a word that used just a literal thing from the root Latin or Greek like rubric does. I think in all of our previous words of the episode or phrases of the episode that It's always been something where that came from the literal definition in the Greek and Latin roots and then changed over time as it became used in modern languages.
Man, I knew 60 was important. See?
Well, there you go. We have some special
60th episode, and it's a special.
Yep, so that is our special occurrence for our 60th episode. And we probably use rubrics quite often because I think we even have a rubric for our podcast series.
Are you talking about the intro and then word of the day kind of thing?
Precisely. I think we followed that rubric all 60 episodes.
Wow.
So now we'll move on to our topic, which is another rubric of our podcast. And we'll try to solve a rubric cube during this episode.
Have you ever solved a Rubik cube?
Well, that was a joke because it's a different word. Because the cube that you would solve with different colors is actually a Rubik's cube.
Different word. Sounds same. Y'all, harkening back to even last episode when we talked about how we met and got engaged very quickly. The very first time I ever saw Adam, he had a Rubik's cube. So it's appropriate, right? That you love a rubric.
I suppose so. I don't even remember a Rubik's cube. So perhaps that will be an episode another time that we can discuss our meeting and history of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
No, but I was just going with a joke because our topic was jokes. So I was trying to throw one in there. I maybe didn't do a very good job, but still got you to laugh. So I guess that's the measure of a successful joke or not.
And it's appropriate to talk about because I feel like our sense of humor is very different. And a lot of times what I think is funny, you don't, or vice versa. So, and then you'll explain the joke and then I'll find it funny. So that's super appropriate. Y'all had a real-time experience of our real life.
Precisely. And now humor is expanding to our progeny as well.
Yeah. They all have a different sense of humor. But our oldest, I think, favors my sense of humor a lot. And it's, is it because he gets more time with me? I don't know. Or he's just bent that way. But he makes me laugh so much with his jokes. Do you want to hear a joke? This wasn't original to him. But he shared it with me, and then I shared it with my brother, who has a similar sense of humor, and we all just had the best laugh ever.
Sure, let's hear it.
And it's not a meme. Y'all, if you've noticed, I've stopped talking about memes. Because we're a podcast, we're not visual. But I still love a good meme.
That's true.
So there's two individuals talking, and the first one goes, my granddaddy is 75 years old, and he did not fight in World War I or II for this kind of silliness.
Well, World War I was over 100 years ago.
I know. He did not fight in World War I or II, like I said.
Well, there you go.
It's so funny. Do you think it's funny?
It's humorous, but I would not find it excessively funny.
I love it. He said that to me. It was he sends me jokes occasionally, and that was one that I had tears in my eyes laughing at. So I think our sense of humor is different. I find those sort of jokes, I find puns extremely funny. I find that kind of situational, like that's exactly what I said. Because he initially did say that he did not fight in those wars. So that's the sense of humor I have. What do you think is funny?
So before we get to that, what would you categorize your sense of humor as then?
I don't know. Situational? My situational humor?
Yeah, situational humor. I think there's probably a little bit of a subcategory within situational humor where most people would call that slapstick comedy.
Yeah. Okay, slapstick. I can see that. I think that's really funny. All the Johnny Carson. Is that what you're thinking of? I think he's funny.
Yeah, Johnny Carson, some of those movies that have some of those off-the-wall situational type things.
Like Waiting for Guffman and The Dog Show. Oh, those are so good.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking of.
You don't like those though, right?
No, not particularly. I do not find them excessively funny.
Would you find it funny? I ruin them because especially that category that there's a whole genre, Waiting for Guffman and The Dog Show, I think it's called, and things like that.
Best in Show.
Best does he even know? What's the one with the band? Oh, that's the best. A Mighty Wind, the best show in the world. I will stand by that. But I think they're so funny that I ruin it probably for other people because I'm laughing before the punchline gets there. Would you enjoy it without watching it with me?
No, probably not. Now, there was, in addition to A Mighty Wind, wasn't there a rock version, or is that...
That's my...
that I thought there was one
that's
specifically...
Waiting for Guffman.
No, I thought there was another one.
Thinking about it makes me laugh. I love it so much.
Spinal Tap is the one I'm thinking of.
Spinal Tap. Yeah, that's a good one too. But A Mighty Wind, y'all, if you haven't seen it, stop listening right now. Go watch it and then come back and tell us how amazing it is. That is my favorite movie, and I have to watch it now.
Yeah, so I think that Waiting for Guffman, which I don't know if I can even recall any details about, and I'm thinking that I may have never seen that. So maybe we'll have to add that to the watch list, or I'll have to do some more research on that to see if I've ever seen that. Now, I have definitely seen Best in Show, A Mighty Wind, and Spinal Tap, and I think I did enjoy Spinal Tap, but it's probably because that overlaps a little bit with my own interests and experience. So where perhaps some of the situational comedy would be funny to you in Best in Show as it relates to a prestigious dog show, that I don't really have any personal experience with dog shows or people that raise dogs for show. Whereas Spinal Tap, because I do like heavy rock music and metal and things of that nature, that there was actually some things that I did find funny in there because I knew that they were specifically making fun of that genre and culture.
Do you think it's similar to right now we're binging A Righteous Gemstone? I feel like everyone I talk to is super into this right now. So we got on the bandwagon, and it's so funny. Do you think that's similar to my humor? Would you enjoy it as much if I wasn't there? Or because we have a lot of church ties, is it similar to you can connect with, like, yes, I've worked in so many churches that I can see the comedy in this?
Yeah, I think it's probably more the latter, where, again, because it overlaps with my personal experience, that I will find some of those things funny. If I was by myself and had a show to watch, I don't think I would even choose to watch that. So because it's a common experience with you, that because I do find it funny enough and it's an enjoyable thing to do together, that we can do that. But if it was just me, I don't know if I would choose to watch that show. I'd probably find something else or whatever the case may be.
Oh, well, first, thank you. That's super sweet. Because it's one of my favorite parts of the day is watching that with you. And also, should I stop telling everyone to watch it? Like, anyone that has a conversation with me right now hears about the Righteous Gemstones and how they need to turn it on. Is that not a good thing to say? Is it not that great?
I don't know. I think you probably have to give some warnings as well, because it has some explicit content in it as well.
Yeah. It's not a family-friendly show.
No. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess anything that you personally enjoy, you will be prone to share it with others and tell them about it. And it could be a common point of conversation, but I don't have any qualms about recommending things that you don't like that I do like. So I don't think that that's a necessary consideration at the absolute, that you must not talk about it just because I would not individually enjoy that particular show.
So I'll share a quick story, and then I want to hear about your humor, because one of my favorite memories to tell people about you is early on in our marriage, you got your wisdom teeth taken out. And one of the things that happened, I was very pregnant at the time, and I was taking you, I was backing out. I had to stop and get your pain meds. I left you in the front seat, went and got the pain meds, and came back. And I was backing out of the parking spot to go home, and you screamed. Like, I've never heard you scream before. I slammed on my brakes naturally, and I'm like, what happened? And I'm like searching around thinking I hit a person or something. And just so straight face, you're like, you just never find me funny. And it's so funny now because I'm like, that wasn't a joke. Like, I thought I ran over a person. So, and it's just so funny now to think back to be like, that came out where you're like, you don't think I'm funny. That wasn't funny. But I feel like I often don't get your humor initially, but then you explain it and I find it super funny. But also, caveat, I love jokes when people explain it afterwards. Like a joke that goes extra long. Like people are you're over the punchline, you dragged it on too long. I find it super funny. So I think that's part of the funniness is when you have to explain it to me. And I'm like, oh, yes, now it's funny. So tell me about your sense of humor.
So, two aspects of my humor and then perhaps an observation. One, I do enjoy a good pun as well. So I think that is where we do have some overlap in our sense of humor, that any of us can tell a pun or fold that into a conversation as sort of a joke, and that will be funny to me. I also think that does harken back to just the content of our podcast, that words are important, and knowing words and their definition can actually be used in a humorous way if you use them in a way that could be a pun or a play on words and things like that. So I do find humor in those type of things, which I think you do as well. So probably some commonality there. And then the other aspect of my humor is typically referred to as dry humor or sarcasm, and some of those things where I think you do have to have a special sense of humor. And I think that does exist to a high degree on my dad's side of the family. So the observation on this is that I think people will adapt their humor to who they are interacting with, that perhaps you would tell a joke or use a pun if that will be found funny by the person that you are interacting with, and that perhaps you will have a different sense of humor if you are interacting with different people. Because I think even our kids, in terms of how you describe our oldest and his sense of humor, is perhaps different than my experience. So I think even at a young age, perhaps he's even adapting his jokes and humor to his audience.
Okay. So he wouldn't send you that meme I was talking about.
Correct. And in fact, he did not.
What kind of sense of humor do you hate?
So we've already talked about it, I think, to some degree, is slapstick situational humor that has no relevance to my own lived experience.
So if it's not relatable to you, you don't find it funny.
Yeah, it's even not that funny to begin with at all. So I think the only redeeming factor that that type of comedy has and actually elicits any type of humorous response in me is only when it's something that I can relate to my own personal experience.
How do you feel about America's Funniest Home Videos? That's what our family's really into right now. We watch a lot of those.
Well, we did watch that quite a bit as a family growing up, and I remember certain segments of America's Funniest Home Videos as more humorous than others. So I'm trying to remember exactly even the rubric of America's Funniest Home Videos. But part of the enjoyment, I think, was because it was a shared experience as a family. So again, that aspect of a shared experience where everyone is enjoying the humor. And then there was the montages. I feel like I enjoyed the montages for some reason more than the other parts of the show.
They went faster. Like, was that more?
Maybe
quick
it was quick snippets that had some humorous things, whereas in terms of some of the other maybe extended clips, you were committing to watching that and then not really certain if it would be humorous or not.
Right. And you kind of touched on it. I think that humor often is such a shared experience. Like, even if something's not necessarily funny, if other people are laughing, it brings so much like lightheartedness and causes you to smile and laugh much more than if you were alone. You love, I mean, you've talked about before, you love going to like heavy metal concerts. And I enjoy going with you to experience it with you. But I love going to comedy clubs. High end ones and also just like open house ones, I think are great too. I love a good laugh. And there's something about being around other people when they're laughing that I feel like it's hard not to laugh in response.
Perhaps, and that could even be a base difference in our own personalities because perhaps you enjoy and value shared experience perhaps more than myself because I don't know if I would go to a comedy club by myself per se, but I certainly have been to concerts by myself and have no issue with that.
I feel like the opposite. I've never been to a concert by myself, nor have I been to a comedy club, but I would go to that probably quicker.
As an individual by
Uh
yourself
huh.
instead of a shared experience.
Yeah. So, my Christmas gift, y'all, this year from Adam was tickets to see Night Bargatze. If you don't know him, he is hilarious and he's really been around forever, but he's really gotten popular lately. In the future, we will go see him. We've seen him once before, too, a couple years ago. And I feel like he's so funny. And the joke that you think is the most funny that he tells, I'm like, I feel like I should be offended, is he goes through this whole thing about his wife and how she doesn't understand the time. He's like, what time do you leave? And she's like, noon. And it's 11:30. And he's like, you're going to miss your plane. And she's like, no, I'm leaving the house at noon. And he's like, what? How is that helpful to me? And I've never seen you laugh harder than that moment. I was like, I feel like I need to be offended. You relate to this so much that if you asked me what time do I leave for my flight and I said noon, and would very much make sense to me, I leave the house at noon, you would get very annoyed. You'd want to know what time my flight took off.
Yes. So, and again, that even is showing that I'll find humor in either the preciseness of words, where you're using a pun or a play on words, or in this case, the imprecise use of words and how it can result in a humorous situation.
And because it's relatable.
And
That's
relatable.
something I would
yes.
do.
Yes, exactly.
One of the other jokes I've laughed more in my life than ever was in high school. I love build-ups with little to no reward. I think it's so funny. I guess it's that slapstick or situational jokes, right? That's why A Mighty Wind and all that is my favorite. But my brother and I had this whole thing with our friends in high school about, like, we have this hilarious joke. Y'all, one day we'll tell you. And they kept begging, and it just got built higher and higher, and more people asked. And we were just like, one day, guys, it's so funny. You don't know. And then we told them the joke, and it was the stupidest, basic joke ever. And their faces were so disappointed and frustrated. And it was hilarious because like, it was such a high buildup with zero reward. And I feel like that's what I find so much joy in with the jokes that take forever to tell. They're not really funny. I love that buildup for nothing. But you would hate that, right?
Maybe.
But you tell those. Okay, tell me about that because you tell those jokes sometimes on purpose to make me laugh. So do you do it because I find it so funny, or you find it funny too?
It's got to be a joke, even with a build-up or a lengthy commentary to get to the punchline is okay, but the punchline has to be funny. So I don't know if I would have been satisfied with this situation where you're describing you and your brother building up this joke and then the punchline was sort of a letdown. Now, if the punchline was actually funny, then I would appreciate it. So it has not so much to do with the length and the build-up, but more with the punchline, I think, and the cleverness of the joke that would make me appreciate it. And going back to Nate Bargatze, there is one joke that I do find humorous, and I think that might be the only one.
What is it?
The one that you already said, because I don't really find Nate Bargatze all that humorous.
Oh, he's so funny. Don't listen to him, you guys. He's so good. And he's clean. It's so hard to find somebody who tells jokes and doesn't cuss or say, no bad language or inappropriate conversations. Like, I could put him on for my grandma or my kids to hear. That's like his whole slogan right now. He's going around and he has a book that just got out. I want that book, by the way. You were asking me what audiobooks I want. I want his book. It's called My Big Dumb Eyes. So we'll link that in the description so y'all can check out too. But that's his whole thing. He was like, I want to be the comedian for grandmas. And it's ridiculous, right? Who wants to that? But he does. And it's true. I can let my grandma hear him without fear that she'll be offended.
That's true. That is somewhat of a hard thing to find. So, who is the guy that went around with Ron White and did the jokes with, like, you're a redneck? Jeff Foxworthy. I feel like that's sort of the most recent clean comedian. Obviously, not all his stuff is like perfectly clean, but it's clean enough that it's going to go over people's heads if they don't really know. So, I don't know. Maybe Nate Bargatze is the next Jeff Foxworthy.
Yeah, he's getting big. So, you heard it here. Not first, probably, but you heard it here.
Or maybe first if you don't get out much. So we usually do jokes at Cub Scouts, which I think is another aspect of humor that fits in with some of these things in terms of puns or clean jokes that have a clever punchline. So maybe we'll do that at our closing meeting for the 2024-2025 year. So perhaps we can end this joke with an episode.
What is it?
See, that's an impreciseness of words, and it made you laugh. So
it made me laugh.
I was going to correct myself, but I just figured I'd go with it.
You knew that would make me laugh.
Yep. So perhaps we can end this episode with a joke, and we can see if it would be good enough or clean enough for the Cub Scouts.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right. So there was this farmer, and he had a pig, and the pig was named Curly. And one day, the farmer was out with his pig Curly, and there were some local neighbor kids that were swimming in the pond adjacent to his property. And one of the kids began to get into some trouble and was not able to stay afloat and was actually beginning to sink down to the bottom of the lake. So the pig, Curly, ran and jumped into the lake, swam to the child, grabbed him, and pulled him to safety. And because of that heroic act of Curly the pig, there was a news agency in the town, and they came to interview the farmer. And so the farmer talked to the news person, and the news person asked, all about the history of Curly and, Curly's mom and Curly's dad. And the farmer told him all about how he had raised Curly from birth, and Curly was a really good pig. And you could tell because he did this heroic act of saving this boy from drowning. And the newscaster was very impressed with all this and said that it was a newsworthy story, and they aired that on the nightly news and everything like that. And Curly became quite a bit famous from that particular thing. So then the next year there was a fire, and there was a old grandma in the house that was on fire, and Curly was right there. And Curly went into the burning house and was able to find the grandma and lead the grandma to safety from the house fire, and the grandma was saved. Now, the house obviously burned all the way down to the ground, but the grandma was saved, and Curly was the one responsible for that. So they had another news anchor come out, and the news anchor, when he first saw Curly, was quite a bit surprised because instead of 4 legs, like when Curly had saved the drowning boy, Curly only had 3 legs at this time. And so the news anchor was taken aback a little bit by this, but continued the interview and asked the farmer about if Curly was afraid of fire. And the farmer's like, well, no. I mean, obviously he ran into the burning building. and save the grandma. So not really afraid of fire. And then the news anchor asked if Curly had any problems from smoke inhalation or anything like that. And the farmer said, nope, he's in perfect health. He was able to save the grandma and is, back to the farm and everything's good. So the news anchor thought it was still a little weird that the pig only had 3 legs, but the news anchor went back and aired the nightly news and everything went about their business. And then another thing happened where there was a car accident and the particular driver of the vehicle was trapped inside the car. So Curly was able to get inside the car through a small opening and unlock the vehicle, because it was not one of these modern vehicles that have automatic unlocks during the event of a crash or anything like that. So Curly was able to get in there through a small opening, unlock the car, and that allowed the emergency response team to get in and save this person. So then the news anchor made another trip out to interview the farmer and was really, really surprised this time because Curly only had 2 legs, and was even surprised that Curly would be able to do this heroic act with only 2 legs. So he asked about, what happened with the car crash, and the farmer told him that they heard this loud crash, and Curly ran, sort of half dragged himself to the car and was able to get into the car and save this person. And then the news anchor had to ask this time and said to the farmer, well, I noticed last time during the heroic act that the pig, Curly, only had 3 legs versus the 4 legs when I first interviewed you during the heroic act of saving the boy from drowning, that at the time of saving the grandma from the fire, that Curly only had 3 legs. And now during this miraculous event where he saved the person from this car crash, he only has 2 legs. Can you tell me why that is? And the farmer said, when you have a pig this heroic, you can't eat it all at once.
I love that. I love when you do those because it's such a build up. It's so long. It's going to go down in podcast history for longest joke. And it's so funny. Oh, man.
Well, there you go. Maybe I'll tell that one to the little Cub Scout girls and boys.
I think you should. Sometimes you tell jokes like that, and I'm like the only parent in the back, and I'm like cracking up. And I like to think they're like, wow, she really likes that guy.
Indeed. So this episode has been a joke, but hopefully you've enjoyed it. See, that's my sarcasm. See, and you don't appreciate that.
I laughed.
It was like a little chuckle.
Pity laugh.
It was a pity laugh. So
no, the Curly joke was funnier.
There you go. So if you have enjoyed this episode, like, share, subscribe, share this joke of an episode with others that you may also find shared humor with, and they might enjoy it as well.
Yeah. I mean, I love laughing and I love jokes because your mouth smiles, and I feel like it just has to lighten the mood and raise your spirits.
Precisely. So from your friends at I Hate Talking, until next time, remember, it is only through talking and jokes that we begin the journey to understanding.